Ma'am, this section's for serious buyers only. The words sliced through the quiet hum of Ridgeway Motors like glass against silk. Heads turned. Conversations paused. A tall man in a navy suit, Howard Benson, the dealership's manager, folded his arms as he stared at the woman standing near a gleaming red luxury sedan. Grace Williams didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her brown leather purse and met his gaze. "I know," she said softly. "That's why I'm here." A chuckle rippled through the room. Someone whispered, "She must have wandered in from the wrong place." Howard's smile was polished, fake, the kind that hid cruelty behind charm. "We just like to make sure people understand what they're looking at," he said, tapping the price tag. "This one's $220,000, before taxes." Grace's eyes lingered on the car, not the man. "It's beautiful," she said. "Does it come in black?" That was all it took. Laughter bubbled from a group of salesmen near the coffee counter. One muttered, "Black? Yeah, just like her imagination." Howard didn't stop them. He stepped closer instead, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Look, sweetheart. There's a used section down the street. We sell dreams here." Grace inhaled slowly, her fingers brushing against her necklace, a habit she had when she was trying to stay calm. "I'm not here to dream," she said quietly. "I'm here to buy." The smile vanished from his face. For a moment, the room felt heavier, like even the air was watching. Then Howard scoffed. "Security," he called. "Please escort this woman outside. She's wasting everyone's time." Gasps. The laughter stopped. Grace stood still as a uniformed guard approached. Her voice stayed even. "You don't have to do that," she said to the guard. "I'm leaving." Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she walked out, each step steady, precise, refusing to break the rhythm. Cameras followed her. A young salesman whispered, "Guess she really thought she could buy one." Outside, Grace paused beside her old silver sedan. The reflection of Ridgeway Motors' tall glass windows shimmered across her face. Inside, she could still hear laughter echoing faintly through the glass. She said nothing. But the silence was sharper than words. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, the soft glow of a lamp falling across scattered papers. Accounting files, loan statements, an old photo of her late husband, and a cup of cold tea. Her phone rang once. She answered. "Grace, it's Clara. You sound tired." Grace smiled faintly. "Not tired," she said. "Just thinking." Clara's voice softened. "About what happened today?" Grace didn't answer right away. Instead, she opened her laptop, typed something, and whispered almost to herself, "They laughed at me, Clara." "I know," Clara said. "Forget them. People like that—" "No," Grace interrupted gently. "I won't forget. I'm just making sure they remember me." There was silence on the line. Then the quiet sound of Clara exhaling. "What are you planning?" Grace's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her tone was calm, steady, almost too calm. "I'm checking the company registry." "The company? What?" "Ridgeway Motors," she said. "I want to see who owns it." Click, scroll, silence. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she read the document on screen. "Well," she murmured, "would you look at that?" "Grace," Clara said slowly, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Grace replied, "that tomorrow morning I'll make a call." She closed the laptop. Her reflection stared back from the dark screen, calm, focused, unstoppable. The next morning at 9:13 a.m., the office of Ridgeway Motors' parent investment firm received a call from a private buyer, female, mid-50s. Wire transfer verified. By noon, the paperwork was complete. Grace Williams leaned back in her chair and whispered to herself, "Let's see how they greet me now." She smiled, not wide, but deep, the kind that comes from a promise made and already halfway kept. Back at Ridgeway Motors, Howard Benson poured himself another cup of coffee, laughing with his staff. "You should have seen her face," he said, like she thought money grows on trees. Just then, the receptionist's phone buzzed. She frowned. "Sir, there's someone here asking for you." "Who is it?" "She says her name is Grace Williams." Howard froze mid-laugh, the mug still in his hand. Around him, the room went quiet. The door swung open, and Grace stepped in. Her voice was calm. "Good morning, Mr. Benson." The room held its breath, and somewhere between that silence and his disbelief, everything began to shift. "Who let her back in here?" Howard's voice cracked through the air like a whip. The laughter from the sales floor died instantly. Every head turned toward the glass doors where Grace stood. Same calm eyes, same quiet smile, but this time, something had changed. She wasn't holding a purse. She was holding a folder. Grace took a slow step forward, her heels echoing against the marble. "Good morning, Mr. Benson," she said evenly. "I'd like to have a word." Howard forced a chuckle, brushing non-existent lint off his tailored sleeve. "I think we've already spoken enough, Ms. Williams. This is a business, not a charity." She set the folder down on the receptionist's counter. "You're right," she said softly. "It's a business. That's why I'm here. To finalize some paperwork," the receptionist frowned. "Paperwork for what?" Grace looked at her and said, "Ownership transfer." For a full 3 seconds, no one moved. Then a salesman snorted. "What is this, a prank?" Howard smiled thinly, the way people do when they're unsure but trying to stay in control. "Ma'am, if you're still upset about yesterday, I suggest—" She interrupted, her tone still steady. "Yesterday you threw me out. Today I own this dealership." The room fell silent. Even the ticking of the clock behind the counter seemed to stop. Howard blinked. "You, what?" "Bought it," she replied. "Every share, every key, every lock on every door." The receptionist looked down at the document in front of her. Official letterhead, signature, legal stamp. Her jaw dropped. Howard's laugh was sharp, nervous. No, that's impossible." He grabbed the papers, flipping through them, his face draining of color. This can't be right." Grace watched him, expression unreadable. "It is," she said quietly. "I made sure of it." Murmurs spread like wind through dry leaves. One salesman whispered, "She's serious." Another said, "I told you she looked familiar." Howard slammed the papers shut. "You can't just walk in and—" "I didn't walk in." She cut him off again. "I bought in." There's a difference. For the first time, Howard had no words. Grace's gaze swept across the room. The same room that had laughed at her, doubted her, erased her. She saw the salesman who had smirked, the woman at the front desk who had turned away, and the same glossy red car gleaming under showroom lights like nothing had changed. Except everything had. "I came here yesterday for a car," she said. "I left with a reason." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Howard's voice broke the silence. "What do you want from us, then? Revenge?" Grace's eyes softened. "No, respect." She turned to the receptionist. "Call everyone. Staff meeting, now," Howard sputtered. "You can't just—" But the receptionist was already dialing. Within minutes, every employee stood in a semicircle, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. Grace stood before them. "Yesterday," she began, "I saw what kind of place Ridgeway Motors has become. A place that measures worth by appearance. That decides who deserves to be here and who doesn't. That ends today." One of the salesmen tried to speak. "Ma'am, we were just doing your job," Grace asked. "Then let's redefine what that means." She turned to Howard. "Effective immediately, Mr. Benson, you're relieved of your position." Gasps. Howard's face went red. "You can't fire me!" Grace looked directly at him. "You're right. I can't fire who's already dismissed. Your attitude did that yesterday." He froze, stunned, speechless. She turned back to the staff. "I believe in running a dealership where customers aren't judged by their shoes or their skin. Where service isn't a performance, it's a promise." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a young mechanic, grease still on his hands, nodded slowly. "About time," he said under his breath. The rest of the room stayed quiet. The kind of silence that's not just shock, it's realization. Grace took one last look at Howard, who stood frozen near the counter. "You said this place sells dreams," she said softly. "Now it will." She turned toward her office. As the stunned crowd watched, Howard muttered something under his breath. "This isn't over." Grace paused, just long enough for her words to land. "You're right," she said. "It's just beginning." She closed the door behind her, leaving him standing in the lobby, surrounded by his own silence. Outside, the rain began to fall, slow, rhythmic, cleansing. And inside Ridgeway Motors, a quiet storm had just begun to reshape everything it touched. "Good morning, everyone. I'm here to see the owner," Grace said calmly, her voice steady as she stepped into Ridgeway Motors. The same glossy floors, the same scent of new leather, the same people who had laughed at her 2 days ago. For a moment, the room froze. The receptionist blinked, confused. "Ma'am, the owner doesn't take walk-ins. Do you have an appointment?" Grace smiled slightly. "Yes," she said. "I believe I do." Before the receptionist could respond, Howard Benson, the same manager who had ordered security to escort her out, stepped out of his glass office. "Oh, it's you," he sneered. "Look, lady, I told you before," but then he saw the two men walking in behind her. One carried a briefcase. The other wore a tailored gray suit and an expression that could silence a room. They weren't customers. They were lawyers. Howard's smirk wavered. "What's going on here?" The man in gray spoke first. "Mr. Benson, allow me to introduce your new employer, Mrs. Grace Williams. As of this morning, Ridgeway Motors is under her ownership." The words hit like thunder. The entire showroom went dead silent. Howard blinked, his mouth falling open. That's impossible. This is a private acquisition. How?" Grace turned toward him, calm and unbothered. "I tried to tell you I could afford the car," she said softly. "You just never let me finish my sentence." The sound of whispers rippled across the floor. Salesmen exchanged wide-eyed glances. The same security guard who had escorted her out lowered his head. Howard stuttered. You can't just walk in here and—" "Oh, but I can," Grace interrupted, stepping closer. "Because as of now, this dealership, your position, and everyone in this room, all of it belongs to me." Howard's face went pale. "You think you can run this place?" Grace tilted her head. "No, I know I can. But first, let's talk about respect." The word hung in the air like a blade. She turned to the staff. "I don't care about titles. I care about how people are treated. From this day forward, no customer will ever be judged by their clothes, their skin, or their wallet. That ends now," some nodded quietly. A few even clapped. But not everyone. One man in the corner rolled his eyes and whispered something under his breath. Grace noticed, but said nothing. "Not yet." Howard, red-faced, snapped. "This is ridiculous!" "You're making a scene." Grace smiled faintly. "You made the scene first, remember? I'm just finishing it." Her lawyer handed Howard an envelope. "Your termination notice. Effective immediately." He grabbed it, hands trembling. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "Maybe," Grace said. "But at least I'll regret it standing on my own 2 feet." Howard stormed out, slamming the door so hard the glass rattled. The silence that followed felt like a storm before the calm. Grace exhaled slowly and looked around the room. "Let's get to work," she said. "We've got a lot to fix." As the staff dispersed, whispers turned to murmurs, then to cautious energy. The dealership was hers now, but beneath the surface, something darker was already brewing. In Howard's abandoned office, a folder sat open on his desk, documents, missing invoices, and payments that didn't add up. Grace's lawyer glanced at them and frowned. "Grace," he said quietly, "I think you should see this." She walked over, her calm expression tightening as she read. "Thousands of dollars misused. Staff payroll discrepancies. A fake supplier account with Howard's signature all over it." Grace's jaw clenched. "He's been stealing from the company," her lawyer nodded. "For years, by the look of it. And I'd bet he's not alone." Grace stared out through the glass at her new showroom, her reflection overlapping the shining cars and the faces of the people watching her. She had won the building, the business, the title. But what she saw now wasn't victory. It was rot beneath polish, Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Then we start cleaning house. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the dealership's sign like an omen. The woman they had laughed at was back, and this time she wasn't here to buy. She was here to rebuild, to uncover every secret buried under those spotless floors. And somewhere out there, Howard Benson wasn't finished either. Because revenge, like success, always demands a return. "Tell me this isn't real," Grace whispered, staring at the document spread across her desk. Numbers, signatures, hidden accounts. Every line was another betrayal buried beneath years of deceit. Her lawyer nodded grimly. "It's all real. Howard wasn't just skimming. He was laundering money through fake vendors. Some of your employees helped him." Grace leaned back, her pulse steady but her eyes burning. "Then it's time we bring the truth into the light." She walked out of her office and into the main floor where the team waited nervously. The dealership's hum, the clicking of keyboards, the soft murmur of sales pitches, faded as Grace climbed the small staircase to the platform where Howard once stood to boast about monthly numbers. "Everyone," she said calmly, "I need your attention." Dozens of faces turned toward her. Some curious, some anxious, some guilty. "I've spent the last 24 hours reviewing Ridgway's records," she continued. "And what I found is more than just bad accounting. It's theft. Organized theft." Gasps cut through the air. One of the salesmen shifted uneasily. A woman whispered, "She knows." Grace's gaze swept over them. "Howard Benson and several of his associates stole from this company and from you. They built their success by taking what didn't belong to them. That ends today," a man near the back spoke up. "You can't prove that." Grace turned toward him, her tone cool. "You're right. I can't yet, but the authorities can. The evidence is already with them." The color drained from his face. He glanced at two co-workers, both avoiding his eyes. "I didn't come here for revenge," Grace said softly. "But you can't rebuild something honest on a foundation of lies. If you were part of it, now's the time to speak up. Because when the police walk in, it'll be too late to find your conscience." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Then a young accountant, barely 30, stepped forward, trembling. "Mrs. Williams, I didn't know how deep it went. Howard said it was just a bonus account. I swear I never saw the whole picture." Grace looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then help me fix it. That broke the dam." One by one, others came forward. Names, files, details. Each confession was another piece of the web unraveling. Grace listened, calm and firm, never raising her voice. Hours later, when the officers arrived, the dealership buzzed with nervous energy. The same glass doors Howard had once strutted through now swung open to uniformed men with quiet authority. Grace watched as they led away 3 employees in handcuffs. Her expression didn't change. No satisfaction, no gloating, just resolve. When the last officer left, the room felt heavier but cleaner, like a storm had just passed. Her assistant, Clara, stepped up beside her. "You did it." "You cleared his mess," Grace exhaled slowly. "No, Clara, I just exposed it." "Cleaning it will take time." She turned toward the window, watching the sunset reflect off the cars outside. "But I'd rather build from truth than profit from a lie." That night, Grace stayed long after everyone else had gone. The lights dimmed, and her reflection shimmered in the showroom glass. A woman once humiliated, now in command of her destiny. But the weight of leadership pressed on her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A familiar voice filled the silence. Smooth, mocking. "You think you won, Grace?" Howard Benson's voice was low, sharp with bitterness. "You took my building, my staff, my name, but you'll never wash the dirt off it. You don't belong in this world." Grace didn't flinch. "You're right, Howard. I don't belong in your world. That's why I'm changing it." There was a pause. Then the line went dead. Grace set the phone down and stared out at the dark parking lot, her reflection merging with the night. For the first time, she understood. This fight wasn't about a car dealership. It was about dignity, justice, and every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong. But deep down, she knew Howard wasn't finished, and the next time he came for her, it wouldn't be with words. The first clue came from a missing signature. One name on a supplier form, T. Greaves, didn't exist in any employee record. Grace caught it late one night while reviewing files under the flickering office light. Something about the handwriting felt wrong. Too neat, too deliberate. She pulled the thread. And what she found beneath it made her stomach turn. The invoices weren't fake. They were laundered. Someone inside Ridgeway Motors was still funneling money out, under her watch. "Not again," Grace whispered. The next morning, she walked into the dealership before sunrise. The place looked perfect. Polished floors, shining cars, fresh coffee brewing, but she could feel it. Something rotten still lingered under the surface. By 8 o'clock, the staff began arriving, laughing, chatting, pretending everything was fine. Grace stood at the balcony above the showroom, watching them. Every smile felt like a mask. Then Clara approached her, holding a stack of papers. "You're not gonna like this," she said quietly. "Our insurance claim from last year, someone reopened it." "Under your name," Grace's eyes narrowed. "Who?" Clara hesitated. "It came from an internal login. Someone in finance." Grace's calm cracked, just slightly. "Get me the list." "Every employee with access." An hour later, the names appeared on her desk, 5 of them. But one stood out, James Porter, a soft-spoken accountant she'd trusted since day one. The same man who'd offered her coffee on her first morning as owner. Grace called him in. "James," she began, her tone steady, "I found something strange in our accounts. I want to believe it's a mistake." He froze, his face pale. I don't know what you mean." Grace slid the printed form across the desk. "Then explain why my name appears on a file you reopened 3 nights ago." Silence. The ticking of the wall clock filled the room. James's lips trembled. It wasn't supposed to go this far. "Howard promised me—" "Howard!" Grace's voice sharpened. "You've been talking to him?" "He said you'd ruin everything," James blurted out, his voice breaking. "He said you'd destroy what we built." "He just wanted to prove you weren't ready." Grace's expression hardened. "So he's still pulling strings?" James looked down, ashamed. "He's planning something." "Something big, he said. He said you'd see what real power looks like soon." Grace rose from her chair slowly, her anger quiet but cold. "James, you're going to tell me everything. Every name, every message, every deal." He nodded, shaking, realizing too late that he had chosen the wrong side. By the time he finished, Grace had the full picture. Howard had allies still inside the company, people sabotaging systems, leaking data, poisoning her reputation. And worse, he was planning to reclaim what she'd taken. That night, Grace stood alone in the empty showroom. The lights reflected off the luxury cars like trapped stars. The same place that once humiliated her now hid the ghosts of betrayal in every corner. Her voice was barely a whisper. "He wants a war?" She looked up, eyes blazing. "Then he'll get one." Outside, lightning split the sky in 2. The storm had returned, and this time Grace Williams wasn't the one running from it. "Your name's on the headline, Grace." Clara's voice trembled as she slid her phone across the table. On the screen, bold black letters screamed, "Ridgeway's new owner under investigation for misused city funds." Grace stared at the words, unblinking. Her coffee sat untouched. "He did it," she whispered. Howard actually did it. Outside, the city buzzed with morning traffic, unaware that one woman's world was tilting on its axis. The article spread like wildfire. Local news stations ran it every hour. Comment sections filled with doubt, hate, and ridicule. By noon, reporters were outside the dealership, flashing cameras in her face. "Mrs. Williams, did you use taxpayer money to buy Ridgeway Motors? Is it true you bribed city officials?" Grace didn't answer. She just walked past them, calm but pale, her silence mistaken for guilt. Inside, some employees avoided her eyes. Others whispered. The same people who had once cheered her now looked afraid. That evening, Clara stormed into her office, furious. "He's trying to bury you." Howard leaked falsified bank records, even paid a journalist to print them. Grace took a deep breath, her voice steady but cold. "Then we expose him." With truth. For the next 2 days, Grace barely slept. She and Clara combed through every document, every email, every audit from the last 3 years. Somewhere inside those files, she knew, was the thread that would unravel his entire web. On the third night, Clara gasped. "Wait, look at this." She turned the screen toward Grace. A series of anonymous payments, all routed through the same shell company. HB Consulting. Grace's eyes sharpened. "HB, Howard Benson." Clara nodded. "He's been laundering money long before you bought Ridgeway." Grace rose from her chair. "Then tomorrow, we stop hiding." The next morning, she walked straight into the studio of Cityscope News, the same channel that had aired Howard's lies. Cameras turned as she entered. The anchor, visibly tense, began. "Mrs. Williams, we weren't expecting—" Grace interrupted calmly. "I know, that's the point." She turned toward the camera. "You've accused me of stealing public funds. I'm here to prove who the real thief is." Behind her, Clara connected a flash drive to the studio screen. The files appeared. Clean, time-stamped evidence, transfers, hidden accounts, signatures, all pointing to Howard Benson. "This," Grace said, her tone cutting through the silence, "is where your source's money came from. And this," she tapped another file, "is how he used fake vendors to steal hundreds of thousands from Ridgeway before I ever walked through its doors." The anchor stuttered. "So, you're saying—" "I'm saying," Grace continued, her eyes unwavering, "that the man who accused me of corruption is the one who built his fortune on it." The newsroom fell silent. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. Then whispers, shock, awe. By evening, the story flipped. Grace Williams exonerated. Former manager accused of fraud. News vans shifted their focus. Reporters who had hounded her now begged for statements. Clara watched her from the side, smiling faintly. "You just turned the storm around, Grace." Grace didn't smile. "Not yet. He's not done. Men like Howard don't go down quietly." Outside, the headlines changed, but the war wasn't over. Somewhere in the shadows, Howard Benson was watching, planning his next move. And Grace Williams, calm, patient, and unshaken, was ready for him. "Tell me, Grace, how does it feel to be the face of a scandal?" Howard's voice oozed through the phone, calm, confident, poisonous. Grace stood by her office window, gripping the phone tighter. Outside, cameras flashed and microphones crowded her gates. "You really think this will scare me?" she asked. Howard chuckled. "Not scare you, darling, just remind you who the public listens to. Reputation is currency, and yours just crashed." Then the line went dead. That night, the smear campaign hit full force. Doctored videos appeared online. Grace shaking hands with officials she'd never met. Fake witnesses claiming she forged contracts. And anonymous employees accusing her of discrimination. Every hour brought a new lie. Every platform echoed his voice. "Grace, the city's calling," Clara said, rushing into the office. "They're suspending your community partnership until this clears up." Grace exhaled slowly, her hands trembling just once before she stilled them. "That's what he wants," she said. "He wants panic." But the damage was spreading faster than truth could catch up. Overnight, customers canceled appointments. Investors backed out. Even some staff began to doubt. A young salesman approached her the next morning, hesitating. "Ma'am, people are saying—" "Maybe you should step down, just until things calm down." Grace looked at him, her expression unreadable. "If I step down, he wins. And then the next woman who walks in here, one who looks like me, will never be treated with respect again." Her words cut through the air like glass. The young man lowered his eyes and quietly walked away. Clara stayed late that night, scrolling through hundreds of posts. "He's got bots, fake accounts, paid blogs, the works. He's not trying to prove anything. He's trying to drown you." Grace didn't answer. She just stared at the glowing Ridgeway Motors sign outside the window. For a moment, she remembered her first day walking into that showroom. The laughter, the disbelief, the humiliation. Now, they were trying to make her disappear again. Her phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. It was a short video clip. Howard, standing in front of his old office, smirking at the camera. "I told you, Grace," he said in the video. You can buy a building, but you can't buy respect. That has to be earned or taken. Grace hit pause. Her reflection glimmered faintly on the dark screen. Calm, steady. But burning inside, then let's take it, she whispered. The next morning, she walked into the dealership dressed in pure white, sharp, composed, glowing under the lobby lights. Every head turned. The whispers stopped. Grace walked past them all, straight to her office, and picked up the phone. "Get me the journalist from Cityscope," she said. "It's time we tell the whole story. Every lie, every theft, every name he ever dragged into this." Her voice was calm. But her eyes, they carried fire, because this time, Grace wasn't defending her name, she was taking it back. "Take it down. Now." Howard's voice was low, sharp, and trembling, the sound of a man losing control. His assistant froze, eyes darting between him and the massive screen showing Grace's face on every major news outlet. By morning, Cityscope had dropped the story, a full exposé detailing the forged documents, paid trolls, and rigged PR deals behind the smear campaign against Grace Williams. Every lie, every bribe, every whisper had been traced straight back to Ridgway Motors and Howard himself. The headline burned in bold letters, "The woman they tried to silence." Across town, Grace sat in her office, sunlight spilling across her desk as her phone vibrated endlessly with messages, reporters, supporters, customers all flooding in. But Grace barely smiled. Victory, she knew, wasn't peace. It was proof. Clara burst in, waving her phone. "Grace, it's everywhere!" "They're calling for Howard to resign. Even his investors are jumping ship." Grace looked up slowly, calm but unreadable. "Good," she said. "Let him feel what it's like to lose everything he thought he controlled." Meanwhile, inside Ridgway's boardroom, chaos reigned. Executives argued over damage control as Howard sat in silence, staring at the article on his tablet. Every photo, every email leak, every timestamp, and it was airtight. Grace had outplayed him. "She's lying," he muttered under his breath. "She has to be lying." But deep down, he knew the truth, a video clip. Played on the news, security footage from the night of the so-called forged meeting. It showed Howard himself instructing a PR consultant to bury her reputation before she learns to bury yours. The room fell silent. Howard slammed. The tablet shut, breathing hard. "Get me a statement," he snapped. "We'll call it a misunderstanding." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, Cityscope says they have the original files. Signed, with your name." For the first time in years, Howard Ridgway had no words. By noon, his empire began to crumble. Shareholders demanded answers. Sponsors pulled their contracts. And for the first time, his carefully polished image, the smiling philanthropist, the self-made mogul, cracked wide open. Grace watched it all unfold from her office, but she didn't celebrate. Instead, she gathered her staff and said quietly, "This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told to stay silent while someone richer, whiter, or louder spoke over them. Today, we remind them that silence has power until it doesn't." Clara nodded, her eyes shining. "So what now?" Grace smiled faintly. "Now, we rebuild." Hours later, the impossible happened. A notification popped up on Grace's phone, a public statement from Ridgway Motors. It read, "We retract all previous claims made against Grace Williams. The statements were based on false information and manipulated data. We extend our formal apology." Below the statement, Howard's name appeared in black ink, his signature. The internet exploded. Comments flooded in. "She did it. Justice served. Black excellence in motion." But among all the noise, one message stood out. It was from an unknown sender. "This isn't over. Some people don't forgive humiliation." Grace's eyes narrowed. She knew that tone, that ego. Howard wasn't finished. She set the phone down, stood up, and walked to the window. Outside, the city buzzed with her story, a symbol, a warning, a victory. But somewhere in that noise, she heard the faint echo of unfinished business. Her reflection stared back at her, steady and fierce. "Then let's finish it," she whispered. Because Grace Williams hadn't just survived the smear. She had rewritten the narrative, and the man who once tried to erase her name was now choking on it. "Tell me this isn't real." Clara's voice trembled as she stared at the blueprint spread across the table, a glass tower rising from the ashes of a scandal. Grace smiled faintly, the kind of smile that hides exhaustion behind quiet defiance. "Oh, it's real," she said, "and it's ours." It had been 6 months since the Ridgway scandal imploded. The smear, the lies, the humiliation, all of it had become a turning point. Investors who once ignored Grace were now begging to be part of her new project, The Haven, a luxury car showroom built not on image, but integrity. Grace stood at the construction site in her hard hat, wind brushing against her face. The land still smelled of dust and machinery, but to her it smelled like freedom. Every hammer strike, every beam lifted, was a declaration. You can't erase what's built with purpose, but even as the foundation grew stronger, whispers returned. "She's moving too fast. She's just lucky. Let's see how long this one lasts." Grace heard them all, and used every word as fuel. One morning, a black SUV rolled into the site. The door opened, and out stepped Howard Ridgway. The workers froze. The sound of drills stopped. Even the air seemed to tighten. Grace turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You've got nerve showing up here," Howard smiled, that same polished, practiced grin she'd seen on magazine covers. "I came to make peace," he said. "You got your revenge. Congratulations. Now let's be adults about this." "Adults?" Grace repeated, stepping closer. "Adults don't destroy people's lives to protect their egos." Howard sighed, pretending calm. "Look, you've got momentum now. The press loves you. I'm offering a partnership. Ridgway Motors and Grace Williams Designs. Imagine the headlines." Grace stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, a short, sharp sound that sliced through the tension. "You want to use me to clean up your name?" He didn't deny it. Grace stepped forward, voice steady and cold. "Howard, you tried to bury me. You don't get to build beside me." Howard's smile cracked. "Careful," he warned softly. "I may be down, but I'm not done." Grace leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "Neither am I." He left without another word. But as his car disappeared down the road, Grace felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not anger, but closure. She didn't need to fight him anymore. Her success would do that for her. Weeks passed. The Haven took shape. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls, a minimalist black and gold interior, and a showroom that reflected more than cars. It reflected Grace's journey. Opening day arrived beneath a golden sky. Cameras flashed, journalists crowded, and people from all walks of life filled the space. Grace stood on stage in a sleek black suit, her natural curls framing her face. She didn't read from a script. She spoke from memory. "They said I didn't belong in rooms like this. They said I was too ambitious, too loud, too much. But here's what they forgot. People like me don't wait to be invited in. We build our own doors." Applause erupted, echoing against the glass. For a moment, Grace closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. Not because she needed validation, but because every clap reminded her of the ones who never got this chance. Later, as the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Clara approached with teary eyes. "You did it, Grace. You really did it." Grace smiled gently. "We did." She turned toward the massive glass windows where the city lights reflected her showroom, elegant, powerful, unshakable. And then, in the reflection, she noticed something. A figure standing just beyond the entrance, half hidden in shadow. Watching, her chest tightened. The figure didn't move, just lingered for a few seconds before disappearing into the night. Grace said nothing. But her jaw set with quiet resolve, because even as her empire rose, she could feel it. The next storm gathering beyond the shine, and this time, she wasn't just ready for it. She was the storm.